Welcome back, guys, to Battleground Stories. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. Thank you. In November 2012, our unit withdrew from routine patrol duty in Jordan. There was no warning or briefing, just an order to prepare and depart before dawn. Lieutenant Harlow gathered us in the motor pool, a map spread across the hood of a Humvee, a flashlight illuminating the darkness before dawn. "We're tracking a lost shipment," Harlow said, tracing the route into the Harrat al-Sham lava fields with his finger. "Container cargo. Fell out of the convoy 3 days ago. Command wants it recovered before dawn." I remember Corporal Delaney, whom we called Bricks Durdick, asking an obvious question. "Sir, 3 days in the open desert is a long time. Why are we just hearing about this now?" Harlow didn't look up from the map. "This is outside our jurisdiction, Corporal. We find it, we seize it, we report it. That's our job." But his jaw was tight when he said it. They tell you, learn to read after enough deployments, the kind that says your commander knows more than he's sharing. We rolled out at 4:30, 4 vehicles, 12 men total. The Harrat isn't like other deserts. It's not sand and dunes. It's ancient lava flow, black rock stretched for miles, jagged and sharp enough to shred tires if you're not careful. The kind of place that looks like the surface of another planet, say under moonlight. Specialist Alvarez was riding shotgun in my vehicle, fingers drumming against his rifle. He was our tech guy, always wired, always moving. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "GPS tracking is standard on every shipment. How does a container just disappear?" I didn't answer because I was thinking the same thing. In 2012, we had satellites that could read license plates from orbit. Losing a shipping container in open terrain shouldn't have been possible. The sun started rising as we pushed deeper into the lava fields, turning the black rock red, then orange, then that harsh white that makes your eyes ache even through sunglasses. Heat came with it, slamming into us like a physical thing. By 7 a.m., it was already pushing 95 degrees. Private Briggs, youngest in our squad, leaned out from the back. "Sarge, how big is this container we're looking for?" "Standard 40-footer, I said. "You'll know it when you see it." "If we see it," Bricks added from the driver's seat. "This place goes on forever." He wasn't wrong. The Harrat stretched in every direction. No landmarks, no vegetation, just endless fields of shattered volcanic rock. Navigation was pure GPS and compass work. One wrong turn and you could drive in circles until your fuel ran out. Around 9 o'clock, Harlow called a halt. We formed up in a loose perimeter, vehicles positioned for quick egress if needed. That's when I noticed something off. The wind had stopped, completely. In a desert, there's always wind, always some kind of air movement. But the Harrat had gone still, dead calm, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. Alvarez noticed it too. He stepped away from the vehicle, scanning the horizon through binoculars. "This is wrong," he said quietly. "Even the heat shimmer looks weird." I moved up beside him, following his line of sight. He was right. The heat distortion that usually dances above hot ground, it wasn't moving naturally. It seemed to pulse, like something was breathing beneath the surface. "Alvarez, quit spooking yourself," Bricks called out, but even he sounded uncertain. Harlow pulled out the tablet with our tracking data. Whatever information Command had given us about the container's last known position, it put us within a 2-mile radius. He split us into 3 teams. Bricks and Briggs would sweep north. Alvarez and 2 others would go east. I'd take the remaining men and push south. "Radio check every 15 minutes, Harlow ordered. "Nobody goes beyond visual range of their vehicle." We find it. We mark it. We regroup. Clear? We confirmed and split up. The Harrat crunched under our boots, every step sending small echoes across the rock field. I was leading 2 privates, both fresh enough that their uniforms still looked new. They stayed close, weapons ready, eyes cutting across the terrain the way you learn to do in hostile territory. 15 minutes in, my radio crackled. It was Alvarez, but his voice was wrong. Distorted, stretched, like someone had slowed down the recording. "Keller, you hearing something?" I keyed my mic. "Say again, Alvarez, you're breaking up." Static. Then a sound underneath the static. A low hum, so deep it was more felt than heard. It vibrated in my chest, made my molars ache. One of the privates behind me stopped walking. "Sergeant, what is that?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. I'd heard jamming before, electronic warfare, signal interference. This was different. This wasn't blocking communication. It was underneath it, like the radio frequencies themselves were carrying something else. My radio crackled again. This time it was bricks. "Harlow, we've got eyes on the container. North section, grid 479. It's here, but what?" Harlow's voice, sharp. A pause. Then bricks, quieter now. "Sir, you need to see this." We converged on Brick's position, vehicles kicking up black dust as we moved. The container sat in a shallow depression, 40 feet of rusted steel half buried in the volcanic rock. But Bricks was right. Something was wrong with it. The container doors were open. Not forced, not damaged. Just open, swung wide like someone had unlocked them from the inside. And around it, in the black rock, were marks. Not tire tracks, not footprints. Just smooth grooves in the stone, circular patterns that spiraled out from the container like something had been dragged across the surface. Harlow approached slowly, rifle up. We formed a perimeter while he moved to the entrance. I watched him look inside, watched his shoulders stiffen, watched him take a step back. "Keller, Delaney, on me." We moved up. The interior was dark despite the open doors, shadows pooling inside like liquid. Our lights cut through, beams landing on metal racks bolted to the walls. They were empty. Whatever had been shipped in this container, it was gone. But that wasn't what made my skin crawl. It was the walls themselves. They were covered in condensation, in 110-degree heat, with the doors wide open. The inside of that container was cold enough to form moisture. I could see my breath when I exhaled. "This doesn't make sense," Alvarez whispered behind me. He'd moved up without orders, tablet in hand, checking readings. "The interior temperature is 42 degrees. That's impossible without active cooling, and there's no power running to this thing." Bricks moved deeper inside, light sweeping across the racks. Whatever was in here, they had it secured tight. Look at these anchor points. Industrial grade. This wasn't hauling supplies. I moved to one of the walls, touched the condensation with my glove. It was ice cold, almost painful through the fabric. And beneath my hand, I felt it. That hum. The same vibration that had been threaded through our radios. It was coming from the container itself, resonating through the metal. "Everyone out," Harlow ordered. "Now." We backed out into the sunlight, but the temperature didn't rise. If anything, the air around the container felt colder. Wrong. That's when Briggs spoke up from the perimeter. Lieutenant? We've got a problem." He was pointing east, toward a ridge of volcanic rock about 300 yards out. At first, I didn't see anything, just heat shimmer and black stone. But then it moved. A figure. Tall, impossibly tall, standing motionless on the ridge. Even at distance, even through the distortion of heat and light, I could tell something was wrong with it. The proportions weren't right. Arms too long. Head tilted at an angle that shouldn't have been possible. "Is that a person?" one of the privates asked. Nobody answered, because none of us knew. Alvarez raised his binoculars, trying to get a better look. But the moment he focused on it, our radios erupted. Not static this time. A sound. High-pitched, oscillating, drilling into our ears until we had to rip the headsets off. When I looked back at the ridge, the figure was closer. Not walking. Not running. Just closer. As if distance itself had collapsed between us. "Mount up!" Harlow shouted. "We're moving now!" We scrambled for the vehicles, weapons forgotten in the rush to get away. I was the last one in, and as I grabbed the door handle, I made the mistake of looking back one more time. The figure was standing directly behind the container now, less than 50 feet away, close enough that I could see it clearly despite every instinct in my brain trying to convince me I was looking at something else. Anything else. It was white, not pale skin white, paper white, bleached bone white. And it wasn't standing. It was hovering, feet inches off the ground, arms hanging limp at its sides, head cocked in that wrong angle, watching us with eyes I couldn't see but could feel locked onto me. I threw myself into the vehicle, and bricks hit the gas before I'd even close the door. We didn't stop driving for 20 minutes. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked back. The radio stayed off because the sound they'd made, that oscillating scream, it hadn't come from interference. It had come from something trying to communicate. When we finally stopped, Harlow's hands were shaking as he lit a cigarette. "We report the container's location," he said. "That's it. We don't mention what we saw." "Sir," I started, but he cut me off. "We don't mention it, Sergeant. Because if we do, they'll send us back. And I don't know about you, but I'm not going back there." I wanted to argue. Wanted to say we had to report everything. But I'd seen it too. That white figure. That thing that shouldn't exist. And deep down, I knew Harlow was right. Some things you don't report because reporting them means facing them again. But that night, lying in my rack at base, I couldn't sleep because I kept hearing that sound from the radios, that oscillating scream, and I realized it wasn't random. It had rhythm, pattern, structure. It wasn't interference, it was language. And whatever that thing was in the Harrat desert, it hadn't been warning us away. It had been asking us something. The next morning, Command wanted answers. Answers we couldn't give. Not the real ones anyway. And what happened next, what they made us do, that's when I realized we weren't the first team sent into that desert. We were just the first team that made it back. The debriefing happened in a windowless room at 6 a.m., 6 hours after we'd rolled back through the gate. No sleep, no time to process what we'd seen. Just metal chairs, harsh fluorescent lights, and two men in civilian clothes who never bothered introducing themselves. They weren't intelligence, weren't brass. They had that contractor look, the kind of operators who exist in the gray space between military and corporate. The older one, salt and pepper hair and eyes like chipped ice, sat across from Harlow while the younger one stayed by the door, arms crossed, watching us like we were suspects instead of witnesses. "Walk us through the recovery operation," the older one said, not asked, ordered. Harlow gave them the sanitized version, found the container at grid coordinates 479, doors open, cargo missing, no signs of forced entry. Recommended further investigation by specialized teams. Clean, simple, nothing that would raise questions. The contractor listened without writing anything down. When Harlow finished, he leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "And the reason you withdrew without securing the site?" Silence, the kind that stretches too long, that starts feeling like an accusation. "Deteriorating weather conditions," Harlow said finally. "Heat index was pushing dangerous levels. Made the call to preserve personnel safety." I kept my face neutral, but inside I was screaming. We'd just lied to Command, lied about what we saw, what we heard, what had made us run like our lives depended on it. Because maybe they did. The contractor's eyes shifted to me. "Sergeant Keller, you were team leader for the Southern Sweep. Anything to add to the lieutenant's report?" I could feel Alvarez tense beside me. Briggs was staring at his boots. Briggs had his jaw locked so tight I thought his teeth might crack. "No, sir," I said. Lieutenant covered it. The contractor held my gaze for what felt like an hour. Then he smiled, thin and cold. "Interesting, because thermal satellite imaging shows an anomaly at that location. Temperature drop of 65 degrees in a 40-foot radius around the container. In the middle of a desert. In November. My stomach dropped. They knew. Of course they knew. The satellites that could read license plates could definitely read temperature signatures. Also interesting, the younger contractor spoke up from the door, is that all 4 of your vehicle radios experienced simultaneous equipment failure at 9:23 hours. Same minute you withdrew from the site. Care to explain that? Harlow's poker face was cracking. Like I said, equipment issues. Environmental factors don't. The older contractor stood up, placed both hands flat on the table. Don't insult our intelligence, Lieutenant. We know what's in that desert. We know what you saw. The question is whether you're smart enough to understand what happens if you talk about it. The room went dead quiet. The threat wasn't even subtle. It was right there, hanging in the air like cordite smoke. We recovered the location of the container, Harlow said carefully. That was our mission. Mission accomplished. The contractor studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You're going back out there tonight. With proper equipment this time, and proper context. Sir, I don't think... We're not asking, Lieutenant. The younger one pushed off from the door. The asset in that container is worth more than your entire unit combined. You're going to retrieve it, or you're going to explain to a court-martial why you abandoned critical national security material in a foreign desert. They left us in that room for another 20 minutes. When they finally let us out, the sun was high and brutal, and none of us could look each other in the eye. Bricks caught up with me outside the barracks. Keller, we're not seriously going back there. We don't have a choice. Like hell we don't. That thing. He lowered his voice, checking to make sure no one was close enough to hear. That thing we saw wasn't human. And those contractors know exactly what it is. This isn't a recovery mission. It's something else. He was right. I knew he was right. But we were soldiers, and soldiers follow orders, even the ones that feel like walking into a trap. At 1400 hours, we got our proper equipment. The contractors brought it themselves, locked cases that required fingerprint authorization to open. Inside was gear I'd never seen in regular deployment. Thermal imaging beyond standard military issue. Audio recording equipment with frequency ranges that went into ultrasonic. And weapons. Not our standard M4s. These were modified, chambered for rounds I didn't recognize, tips that looked almost crystalline. Specialty ammunition, the older contractor explained, not explaining anything at all. If you encounter resistance, these will be effective where conventional rounds won't. Alvarez was examining one of the cartridges, turning it over in his palm. What kind of resistance are we expecting in an empty desert? The contractor's expression didn't change. The kind that's been there longer than any of us. The kind that doesn't like being disturbed. That should have been our red flag. Should have been the moment we refused, consequences be damned. But they had us cornered, and they knew it. Court-martial or face whatever was waiting in the Harrat. Some choice. We rolled out at 1800, convoy of 4 vehicles again, but this time with 2 additional trucks following behind. Black SUVs with civilian plates and tinted windows. The contractors, I assumed, though they kept their distance, hanging back just far enough to stay out of sight but close enough to respond if things went sideways. The drive back to the site took 3 hours. The sun was setting as we approached, painting the lava fields in shades of crimson in shadow. Beautiful, if you didn't know what was waiting. The temperature had dropped faster than it should have. By the time we dismounted, it was 58 degrees. In a desert. In November. In a region where nighttime temps rarely dipped below 75 degrees. The container sat exactly where we'd left it, doors still open, darkness pooling inside. But the marks around it, those spiral grooves in the rock, they were different, deeper, more numerous. Like something had been circling it over and over since we'd left. Harlow organized the perimeter, positioning our vehicles with headlights facing outward. The new equipment was distributed. Thermal scopes, audio sensors, the specialty ammunition loaded into our weapons with a sound like breaking glass. Alvarez set up the recording equipment. Harlow ordered, "I want full spectrum audio capture. If that thing makes a sound, I want it documented." The tech specialist moved to comply, but his hands were shaking as he unpacked the sensors. "Sir, if it's already here, if it's watching us right now, then we'll know soon enough. Move." I took Bricks and 2 privates, formed a fire team to approach the container. The closer we got, the colder the air became. By the time we reached the entrance, I could see my breath in the beams of our flashlights. The interior was exactly as we'd left it: empty racks, condensation on the walls, and that hum, deeper now, resonating through the metal, through our bones, making it hard to think clearly. Bricks moved to one of the anchor points, examining where whatever had been secured had torn free. These weren't cut. They were pulled apart, bent. Look at the metal. He was right. The industrial-grade steel was twisted like tinfoil, warped outward as if something had simply reached through and yanked itself free without regard for the material in its way. A crackle from my radio. Alvarez's voice, high and tight. "Keller, I'm picking up something on the sensors. Audio signature, subsonic range. It's moving, circling our position." I stepped out of the container, scanning the perimeter. The thermal scope showed nothing but cooling rock and the heat signatures of our own men. But Alvarez was right. I could feel it now. Not hear it, but feel it, that same vibration from earlier, except it was everywhere, coming from all directions at once. "Harlow, we need to..." The radios screamed. Same oscillating sound from before, except louder, more intense, drilling into my skull until I had to rip the headset off. All around the perimeter, men were doing the same, clutching their ears, some dropping to their knees. When the sound stopped, the silence that followed was worse. Because in that silence, we heard something else. Footsteps. Not boots on rock. Something lighter. Something that didn't quite make the sound of weight hitting ground. It appeared at the edge of our lights. Not walking into view. Just there. As if it had always been there, and we'd only just noticed. The Pale Watcher. That's what Briggs would call it later. The only name that fit. It stood just beyond the illumination, tall and white and wrong, arms hanging too long, head tilted at that impossible angle, watching us with eyes we couldn't see but could feel. "Contact," someone shouted, raising their weapon. "Hold fire," Harlow barked, but his voice cracked on the second word. The thing moved, not forward, not back, just shifted, and suddenly it was closer. No steps, no motion, just instantaneous relocation, like space itself was bending around it. That's when discipline broke. Someone fired. A single shot that echoed across the lava fields, the specialty round leaving a trail of light as it crossed the distance. The round hit center mass. I saw it impact, saw the crystalline tip shatter against that white surface, saw the thing pause, head tilting further, considering the attack the way you might consider an insect. Then it moved again, and this time, it was right there, standing between 2 of our vehicles, close enough that I could see details I wish I couldn't. Its surface wasn't skin, wasn't cloth. It was something else, something that seemed to absorb light, that made your eyes slide off it like water off glass. More shots, rifles opening up, the specialty ammunition leaving contrails of pale fire. Every round hit. Every round did nothing. The thing stood there, motionless, letting us waste our ammunition, letting us understand how futile our technology was against something that shouldn't exist. Alvarez was screaming into his radio, trying to reach the contractors. "We need support. It's here. It's right here. Nothing's working." Static. Then a voice, calm and clinical. "Maintain position. Do not withdraw." "Are you insane?" Alvarez shrieked. "It's not affected by anything where..." The radio died. All of them, simultaneously. The vehicle engines followed, coughing and dying despite full fuel tanks. The headlights flickered once, twice, then went dark. We stood in the moonlight, weapons useless, technology dead, facing something that had just demonstrated complete superiority over everything we'd brought to fight it. The pale watcher moved again. This time I watched it happen. Watched the space between where it was and where it appeared simply cease to exist. It was in front of me now, close enough to touch, close enough that I could feel the cold radiating from it like an open freezer. Up close, I could see its face, or what should have been a face. Smooth white surface, no features, no openings, just a blank expanse where eyes and mouth should be. But it was looking at me. I could feel its attention, focused and intense, studying me the way a scientist studies a specimen. Then it reached out, one of those two long arms extending toward me, fingers that had too many joints, moving with a precision that was almost mechanical. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only watch as those white fingers moved closer to my face. That's when bricks tackled me. We hit the ground hard, rolled, and when I looked back, the thing was gone. Not walked away, just gone. Vanished like it had never been there. The engine started again. Radios crackled back to life. The headlights blazed, illuminating empty desert. We were alone. Harlow was the first to speak, voice barely above a whisper. Everyone mount up. We're leaving. Now. Nobody argued. We scrambled for the vehicles, checked twice that everyone was accounted for, then drove. We drove hard and fast, pushing the engines, not caring about the rough terrain, just putting distance between us and that place. It wasn't until we were 30 miles out that someone noticed. Briggs, sitting in the back, staring at his hands. "It touched me," he said softly, "when it was close. Just for a second. It touched my hand. We all looked." His left palm had a mark. Not a burn, not a bruise, just a perfect white circle, like frostbite, like the color had been drained out of his skin. "Does it hurt?" I asked. He shook his head. "Can't feel anything. It's just cold, even though it's not cold outside anymore." The mark would stay with him, wouldn't fade, wouldn't spread, just stay there as a permanent reminder that something from outside our understanding of reality had made contact. When we got back to base, the contractors were waiting. The older one took one look at Briggs' hand and nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "Debrief at 0800, was all he said. But that night, lying in my rack again, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment when the thing had reached for me. Because I'd seen something in that smooth white surface. For just a fraction of a second, there had been something. A shape, a pattern, like it was trying to show me something. And the worst part? I understood it. For that split second, I'd understood what it was trying to communicate. Not words, not thoughts, but something deeper. Something that made every certainty I'd ever had about the world feel like a comfortable lie we tell ourselves to sleep at night. The Harrat Desert was hiding something. Something old. Something that had been there long before Jordan. Before any of us. Before civilization itself. And we'd just woken it up. Tomorrow's debrief would demand answers. But the only real answer was one that command wouldn't accept. That the contractors already knew. That would haunt every one of us for the rest of our lives. Some things aren't meant to be recovered. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. And some missions are designed not to succeed but to test whether the people who carry them out are willing to face the truth. We'd faced it. And now we'd have to live with what we'd seen, if they let us. The debrief at 8 o'clock wasn't in the same windowless room. This time they took us to a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, the kind of place where conversations never officially happen and nothing gets recorded unless they want it recorded. There were more of them now, not just the two contractors. Four others in suits, one woman with NSA credentials clipped to her belt, and a man in an Air Force colonel's uniform who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. We sat on one side of a long table. They sat on the other. Between us was a folder, closed, unmarked. The older contractor opened it. Inside were photographs, satellite imagery of the Harrat, thermal scans showing that impossible temperature drop, audio waveforms of the sounds our equipment had recorded, and one more image that made my blood run cold. It was a photograph, old, degraded, dated 1957. It showed men in period military uniforms standing around a different container in what looked like the same desert. And behind them, barely visible in the background, was a white shape, tall, arms too long, head tilted wrong. What you encountered in the Harrat al-Sham lava fields, the contractor began, has been there for a very long time. Longer than the state of Jordan, longer than modern civilization. We estimate, based on archaeological evidence in the region, that it predates human presence in the Middle East by approximately 40,000 years. Nobody spoke. We just stared at that photograph, at proof that whatever we'd seen, it had been seen before. The NSA woman leaned forward. In 1956, a joint US-UK geological survey team was mapping volcanic formations in the region. They found something. An object buried under 20 feet of cooled lava. When they excavated it, they discovered it wasn't natural. It was metallic, but not any alloy we could identify. And it was cold, 20 degrees below zero in the middle of summer. They tried to move it, the colonel added, voice flat. Brought in equipment, excavation crews, the works. That's when they encountered the first guardian. Guardian. That's what they were calling it. Not entity, not creature. Guardian. As if it had a purpose, as if it was protecting something. Over the next 50 years, the contractor continued, there have been 6 attempts to remove or study the object. Every attempt has ended the same way. Equipment failure, personnel experiencing psychological distress, and encounters with what you've now seen firsthand. Harlow found his voice. You're telling us this thing has been killing people for half a century, and you just keep sending more? It hasn't killed anyone, the woman corrected. That's what makes it unusual. Every team that's encountered it has survived. Traumatized, certainly. Changed, absolutely, but alive. It could have killed you last night. It had every opportunity. Instead, it studied you, marked one of you, and let you leave. She looked directly at Briggs. How's the hand? Briggs held it up. The white circle was still there, stark against his skin. Can't feel it. Like it's not even part of me anymore. You'll regain sensation in approximately 6 weeks, she said with the confidence of someone who'd seen it before. The mark will fade in 6 months, but you'll always know where it was, a kind of phantom sensation. Everyone who's been marked reports the same thing. Marked for what? I asked. What's it trying to do? The contractor closed the folder. We don't know. We have theories, but no concrete answers. What we do know, though, is that the object under that lava field is generating some kind of field, energy signature unlike anything in our database. And the Guardian, as we call it, appears to be maintaining that field, keeping the object contained. Contained? Brick sat forward. You mean that thing is keeping something worse locked up? Silence. The kind that confirms your worst suspicions without anyone having to say the words. The colonel spoke up. 3 months ago, there was a seismic event in the Harrat. Minor, barely registered. But it created a fracture in the lava cap over the object. The field weakened, expanded. Which is why we needed to move the monitoring equipment that was in that container. It was getting too close, and the readings were becoming erratic. Monitoring equipment, Alvarez repeated slowly. That's what was in the container. Not weapons, not some experimental tech. Sensor arrays, the NSA woman confirmed, designed to track the field's expansion. We've been watching this thing for 60 years, trying to understand it. The container was automated, supposed to relocate itself if the field shifted. Instead, the field disrupted its systems, and it ended up exactly where we didn't want it, right next to the object. I felt something click in my mind. The Guardian moved it. That's why it was open, why the equipment was gone. It moved everything away from the object. The contractor nodded. That's our assessment. Whatever that entity is, it's not hostile. It's protective of the object, of the field, maybe even of us in its own way. It's keeping something contained, and it will eliminate any threat to that containment. But it didn't eliminate us, Harlow said, because you weren't a threat. Once you withdrew the first time, once you understood you were outmatched, you were no longer a problem. The second time, when you returned with specialized equipment, it demonstrated that equipment was irrelevant. Once you understood that, once you accepted it, you were allowed to leave again. It's teaching us, I said quietly, like training an animal, showing us boundaries. The woman's eyes locked onto mine. Exactly. You're not the first to realize that, but you might be the first to understand the implications. She stood, walked to a screen on the wall, pulled up another image. This one was a map of the Harrat, marked with dozens of red circles. These are locations where the field has been detected over the last 60 years. It's expanding, slowly but measurably. At current rates, the field will reach the outskirts of Amman in approximately 80 years. We need to understand what we're dealing with before that happens. And you want us to go back, Bricks said flatly. No. The contractor's voice was firm. We want you to forget. Every detail of what you saw, what you experienced, gets classified at the highest level. You sign documents that carry a 25-year federal prison sentence if violated. You never speak of this to anyone, including each other. And in return, you complete your tours. You go home. You live your lives. And if we refuse, I asked. The colonel stood, straightening his uniform. Then you don't leave this facility. National security supersedes individual rights in matters of this magnitude. We can't have this information public. The panic alone would destabilize entire regions. We were trapped. Again. Just like before, but this time with legal chains instead of mysterious entities. One by one we signed. Pages of legalese that basically said we'd witnessed nothing, knew nothing, would say nothing. My hand shook as I wrote my name, and I wondered if this was how every truth got buried. Not through conspiracy, through paperwork. They separated us after that, different assignments, different units, scattered across the globe like seeds in the wind. I wouldn't see Harlow, Bricks, or any of them again until years later, at a reunion that felt more like a support group for people who'd survived something they couldn't talk about. Briggs' hand healed just like they said it would. 6 weeks for sensation to return. 6 months for the mark to fade to a barely visible scar. But he told me, years later, over beers we weren't supposed to be sharing, that he still felt it. Every morning when he woke up, a coldness in his palm that shouldn't be there. It's a reminder, he said, staring into his glass, that we're not alone, that we never were, that there are things older and stranger than anything we've been taught to believe in. I rotated back to the States 4 months after the Harrat. Got out, went to college on the GI Bill, tried to build a normal life. But normal felt like a lie. How do you go to 9 to 5 job when you've seen something that shouldn't exist? How do you worry about traffic and bills and relationship drama when you know there's something in a desert, in Jordan that's been there for 40,000 years, watching, waiting, protecting something we're not ready to understand? I started researching, not officially, just late-night internet deep dives, FOA requests that always came back heavily redacted, conversations with people who claimed to know about government secrets, and I found patterns, stories from other deserts, other remote locations, entities that didn't quite fit, objects that generated impossible readings. Always the same structure, always the same response. Encounter, withdraw, silence. In 2018, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line, just a link to a declassified document from 1962. It was a report from that UK-US Geological Survey team. Most of it was blacked out, but one paragraph remained. The entity displays behavior consistent with artificial intelligence, but predates human technology by millennia. Recommendation: do not engage, do not attempt removal, observation only. Whatever this is, it was put here deliberately. We must consider the possibility that it's keeping us safe, not threatening us. That was it. That was the truth they'd known for 60 years. The Guardian wasn't our enemy. It was the keeper of something we weren't ready for. And maybe, if we're lucky, we never will be. I tried to trace the email, find out who sent it, but it bounced back. Encrypted, routed through servers across 6 countries, untraceable. But I knew who it was, one of the contractors, or maybe someone else who'd been to the Harrat and come back changed. Someone who thought I deserved to know that what we'd seen mattered, that it wasn't just going to be buried and forgotten. Because here's what I've learned in the years since that night in the desert. The world is bigger and stranger than we're allowed to know. There are things in remote places, things that predate our understanding of history, things that governments know about but can't control and won't acknowledge. And the people who encounter these things, we're not heroes or witnesses. We're just the ones who got too close to something that was never meant to be touched. The Harrat is still there. The object is still there. The Guardian is still there. Satellites still monitor the field, watching for expansion, for changes, for any sign that whatever's contained might break free. And if it does, if that day ever comes, I don't think weapons or technology or military strategy will make any difference. Because we've been operating under the assumption that we're the dominant species on this planet, that we've conquered nature, that we understand our place in the universe. But the Pale Watcher proved otherwise. It proved that there are older rules, deeper mysteries, and forces that were here before us and will be here long after we're gone. I don't tell this story to scare you. I tell it because silence is what they want. Silence is how truth dies. I've carried this for 12 years, watching that mark on Briggs' hand fade, feeling the weight of that cold presence every time I close my eyes, knowing that somewhere in Jordan, in a field of black volcanic rock, something is standing watch over secrets we're not ready to understand. Will we ever be ready? I don't know. Maybe that's not the question. Maybe the question is whether we have the humility to accept that some things are beyond us, that some doors should stay closed, that some guardians should be left undisturbed. The contractors told us to forget. They told us it was for national security, for the greater good, for our own safety. And maybe they were right. Maybe some truths are too heavy for the world to carry. But I remember every detail, every moment, the cold air around that container, the oscillating sound from the radios, the way the Pale Watcher moved without moving, the feeling of its attention, vast and alien and utterly beyond my comprehension, and the understanding, brief and terrible, that it was trying to communicate something. I think it was a warning, not a threat. A warning, like a parent telling a child not to touch the stove. Stay back, don't interfere. We're protecting you from something you can't survive. And the terrifying part, I believe it. Whatever's under that lava field, whatever's generating that impossible cold, that expanding field, that thing the Guardian has been watching for thousands of years, we're not ready. Not now, maybe not ever. So when you see reports of strange temperature anomalies in deserts, when you hear about military units conducting exercises in remote locations with no clear purpose, When you read about scientists studying sites that predate human civilization, remember that there might be more to the story. There might be things being kept from us not out of malice, but out of necessity. The Harrat al-Sham lava fields look peaceful from above, just black rock and empty space. But I know better. I've been there. I've seen what watches from the shadows, and I've learned that some places are off limits not because of politics or resources, but because they're being guarded. By what? By whom? For how long? I don't have those answers. Nobody does. But I know this much. Whatever we found in that desert in 2012, it's still there, still watching, still protecting, still keeping something contained that would change everything we think we know about our place in the universe. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly where it should stay. Some doors are closed for a reason. Some secrets are kept not to control us, but to preserve us. And some missions don't end with medals or recognition. They end with the understanding that you've touched something ancient and powerful and utterly beyond human comprehension. I've told you what happened. I've broken my silence, violated agreements that could land me in prison, risked everything to share this truth, not because I want recognition, not because I want vindication, but because I think people deserve to know that the world is stranger than we're told, that there are mysteries out there that governments watch but can't solve, and that sometimes the scariest thing isn't what we discover. It's what's been there all along, waiting to be found. The Pale Watcher is still in the Harrat, still standing guard over whatever lies beneath the ancient lava. And if you ever find yourself in that desert, in that vast expanse of black rock under infinite stars, and you feel a cold that shouldn't exist, and you see something white in the distance that doesn't move like anything natural, do what we did. Withdraw, accept you're outmatched, and understand that some things are protected for a reason, because the alternative, the cost of forcing that door open, might be more than humanity can survive. That's my story. That's what happened in 2012 when we entered the Harrat Desert, looking for a lost container. We found it. And we found something else. Something that's been there longer than nations, longer than wars, longer than our entire concept of history. And it's still there, watching, waiting, keeping its silent vigil over mysteries we're not ready to understand. If you're still watching without subscribing, now's the time. Hit that button. Share this video with people who can handle the truth. Tell us in the comments where you're from, what time you're watching, and whether you've ever encountered something you couldn't explain. Something that changed how you see the world. Because stories like this, they don't end. They just wait for the next person brave enough or foolish enough to step into the unknown. And maybe, somewhere in a desert in Jordan, something is waiting for that moment. Patient, eternal, unchanged. The Pale Watcher isn't the mystery, it's the guardian of the mystery, and that distinction makes all the difference.